The floor was slick with bleach. Jackson knelt low, pressing a worn mop into the tile as the chemical sting crept into his sinuses and settled like smoke in his lungs. He didn't flinch. He didn't pause. He scrubbed harder. Behind him, footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, then a voice. Bored, impatient, cut through the silence. "You done yet?" He said nothing, didn't even lift his eyes. Another voice, colder, sharper this time, added, "Lunch is over when that toilet sparkles." He gave a silent nod, muscles tensing as he resumed scrubbing with renewed urgency. The mop handle dug into the calloused skin of his palm, and his wrist throbbed with each movement. The corner of a cracked tile scraped his knee through the thin fabric of his pants, but he didn't adjust. Pain wasn't new. Discomfort didn't matter. No one helped. No one offered a word. To them, he was just the new guy, another body in coveralls, another name to forget. That's what they thought. That's what he needed them to think. But Jackson Harper wasn't just another janitor. He was the founder and CEO of this very company. For the next 72 hours, he had shed every trace of power and comfort to live like a ghost within his own empire. He wasn't there for a publicity stunt. He wasn't seeking applause. He was searching for truth, the kind that only revealed itself when no one was watching. He had walked the polished hallways of corporate headquarters, worn tailored suits, shaken hands with board members. But long before the boardrooms and bottom lines, there had been late nights and locked doors, loading docks and aching backs. He had built this company shelf by shelf, crate by crate, and somewhere along the climb something had slipped. He had heard whispers, one store where things felt wrong, cold service, empty smiles, a revolving door of good employees walking out without a word. It didn't make sense on paper, but Jackson had always trusted people more than spreadsheets. Numbers could be manipulated. Eyes couldn't lie. So here he was. No car service, no briefcase, just an old pair of boots, a name tag that read Jake, and a quiet promise to see what had been hidden in plain sight. What he'd find over those next 3 days would shake the foundation of everything he thought he knew. And it all started here, on a wet floor, under flickering fluorescent lights, with a mop in his hand and no one to notice. It started small, like a hairline crack in an old wall, barely noticeable but impossible to ignore once seen. As Jackson walked past the front register, Maria was still there, her posture steady but her eyes heavy. She moved deliberately, folding each receipt as though it carried weight, as though the act itself deserved dignity. That kind of quiet care wasn't common here, and he saw it. He paused. "Long day?" he asked, his voice low. She gave a tired smile that barely touched her lips. "Long year," she said, and went back to folding. They didn't speak more than that, but in that brief moment, strangers and silence, something settled between them. A recognition. An unspoken truth that both of them were carrying more than they let on. Maria wasn't just working. She was enduring, surviving a system that demanded everything and gave back nothing. Jackson noticed her slip a small note into her pocket. Maybe a grocery list, maybe a reminder about a second job or a bill due tomorrow. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. What mattered was the way she did it. Quietly, like a person used to carrying burdens that no one else saw. As Jackson turned to go, Maria reached into the drawer beside her and pulled out a pair of gloves. "You'll need these again tomorrow," she said, her voice flat but not unkind. He took them without speaking, but inside something shifted. Not a crack this time, but the start of a deeper question. How long had it been like this? How many people had come and gone unnoticed and unheard before someone finally decided to care? The next morning came with the same dull rhythm, the same flickering lights, the same hollow greetings that never came. Jackson moved through the back of the store, stacking boxes, invisible to the world around him. Tyrone passed by, nodded briefly, and looked away, like the gesture itself was dangerous. Jackson began to understand. Conversations here were currency. Too much talking could cost you more than your job. No jokes, no camaraderie. No one asked your name if they didn't have to. He asked one employee where the cleaning supplies were stored. They pointed in silence and disappeared down the aisle. This wasn't a bad day. It was a culture. Ingrained, accepted, enforced through silence. Jackson could feel it now, like fog in his lungs. This place didn't just demand obedience. It punished connection. It was the kind of environment that didn't need to say, "Don't speak," because the air already whispered it in every breath. By midday, Jackson knew the layout by heart, but more than that, he understood the choreography. The way workers avoided each other's eyes, the quiet alliances, the spaces where people worked faster and others where they lingered out of dread. He noted who carried weight and who passed it on. He noticed who still tried and who had given up. Connor rarely left his office, but when he did, he sliced through the room like a blade. Short commands, quick glances. Jackson watched a young worker drop a box of canned goods. Not one person moved to help. No sound, no reaction, just quiet judgment. The mess was cleaned in silence. Maria, as always, moved methodically, folding, sorting, never stopping. Even Tyrone, who had once shown kindness, now seemed distant, like he had built walls inside himself that no one could climb. Jackson understood that too well. He took mental notes, but not the kind that go into reports. These were notes of pain, of people, of patterns. The absence of sound was telling him everything he needed to know. It wasn't just that morale was low, it was buried, forgotten, like these workers had been taught to expect nothing more. The warehouse in back was suffocating. No fans, no windows, just dust, heat, and the hum of tired machines. Jackson was assigned to unload a new delivery, heavy boxes, stacked high, no dolly in sight. He asked for help. Connor didn't even glance up. "You're a grown man, figure it out." And so he did. Trip after trip, his arms burned, his breath grew shallow, and sweat soaked through his shirt. Still, no one offered a hand. Some watched, most didn't care. He could feel the skin between his fingers, raw from cardboard edges. Then came the moment that stung more than the pain. One of the boxes tore, cans scattered across the concrete. Behind him, laughter. "Careful, rookie," someone chuckled. "That stuff's worth more than you are." Another voice chimed in, louder, meaner. "Bet those hands never worked a real job before." Jackson didn't respond. Not a glance, not a word. He just gathered the cans, one by one, stacked them with slow precision. It wasn't the insult that hurt. It was the silence that followed. No one intervened. No one stood up. The cruelty wasn't shocking. It was expected. This wasn't a bad shift. This was normal. And for the first time in a long while, Jackson felt small. Not as a boss in disguise, but as a man. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly how they wanted him to feel. He moved toward the fridge aisle. The floor was slick. He didn't see it in time. The box he carried slipped from his arms, crashing to the ground. Glass bottles rolled across the floor, one shattered. And for a moment, everything stood still. Then came the sound of footsteps, and judgment once again. The splash echoed, sharp against the cold tile. A bottle shattered, liquid spreading like a slow accusation across the floor. For a moment, there was nothing. No footsteps, no words, just stillness. Then came the voice. "Are you blind?" It was Connor, his tone sharp enough to slice skin. He crossed his arms and walked over, face twisted in disdain. "Seriously? I've seen kids with better grip." A few customers turned toward the noise. One older man shook his head, his expression painted with something Jackson hadn't seen in a while. Disappointment. Not outrage, not anger. Just a quiet sigh that said, "This again?" Jackson didn't respond. He crouched down, picked up the broken glass, and began mopping the spill. No defense, no apology, just quiet acceptance. Not because he was guilty, but because something inside him whispered, "Not yet." Watch, remember, let them show you who they are. Connor scoffed again. "You're lucky we're not charging you for the damage." Still, Jackson kept working, his knees aching against the hard floor. His hands reeked of vinegar, glass, and humiliation. He didn't feel shame, but he felt the weight of something deeper. The absence of respect. It was gone here, stripped down to silence, and for the first time, he wasn't just an observer of that loss. He was experiencing it in real time. When he stood, Maria appeared beside him like a shadow stepping into light. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She simply handed him a clean cloth and knelt beside him, wiping away the last of the mess. Together, they finished in quiet coordination. "Don't mind him," she said softly. "He talks big when there's an audience." Jackson glanced at her. Same tired eyes, same steady hands, but something unshakable lived behind her stillness. A strength carved by years of endurance, not by choice, but necessity. She didn't say it with bitterness, just truth. This was her normal. He wanted to thank her, but her expression said, "Don't make it a moment, just move on." So he did. As they returned the cart to the back, Jackson felt the weight of her presence beside him. Maria didn't need a title. She led by example. Her decency was quiet but louder than any command Connor had barked. And that impression lingered, heavy in his chest. Later, an older man stood patiently at the counter, a basket in one hand and a coupon in the other. He wasn't demanding, just waiting. The cashier ignored him, lost in her phone. Another employee walked past without even glancing. He cleared his throat, once, then again. Still nothing. Maria noticed. She stepped away from stocking shelves and approached the counter, her voice gentle. "Hi there, need help with that?" The man's face lit with relief. His hands trembled slightly as he handed her the coupon. She took it with both hands, scanned the item slowly, carefully, like it mattered. Jackson watched from a distance. No one else noticed. No one else cared. But she did. Not because someone was watching, not for praise. She did it because doing the right thing had become her silent rebellion against a broken culture. And Jackson realized Maria wasn't part of the store's atmosphere. She was pushing against it every single day. The sun had begun to set when Connor's voice rang out again. "Trash needs clearing. Out back." No explanation, no thanks, just commands. Jackson said nothing. He grabbed the bin and pushed it through the back lot. The wheels screeched over cracked pavement. The dumpster overflowed with rot. The smell clawed at his throat. He tied the bags, lifted one after another. His arms screamed. Sweat slid down his spine, but he didn't stop. When he finished, the lot was empty, the back door locked behind him. He stood there, surrounded by silence and decay, not exhausted, but gutted. This wasn't about labor. He had done hard work his whole life. This was about how it was handed to him, as if he didn't matter, as if he wasn't even worth basic decency. And in that moment, Jackson didn't feel like a CEO. He felt invisible, disposable, alone. Day 2 began early. Jackson was assigned to restock bulk items, paper towels, cleaning spray, bottled water. He asked for a dolly. Connor didn't glance up. "Use your hands. Builds character." No fight, just action. Jackson bent low and lifted the first box. It was heavier than expected. The cardboard was damp, the edges soft and slick. One box tore slightly. He caught it before it split open. Others walked past. One offered a half smile, then kept going. Each trip grew longer. The hallway felt narrower, the silence louder. No water, no break, just more. Jackson didn't mind the strain. He minded the message. You don't belong here. You don't deserve help. In the stockroom, a mislabeled box sent the wrong item to the front display. Connor exploded. Who did this? Tyrone stepped forward. You think? Con snapped. You just cost us a full reorder. Tyrone tried to explain, but Connor waved him off. Save it. Fix it. Stay out of the way. Jackson had seen it. It wasn't Tyrone's fault. Someone else had relabeled it earlier. He opened his mouth. Connor turned to him. You got something to say? Jackson hesitated. No, sir. The lie tasted bitter. Tyrone didn't look angry, just used to it, like blame was part of the job. That crushed Jackson more than shouting ever could. Later, Maria coughed behind the counter, twice, then again. Her voice was hoarse. She leaned on the counter for balance. During a lull, she walked to Connor's office. Can I take tomorrow off? Just to rest? Connor didn't lift his head. We're already short, can't lose another body. But not my problem. Clock back in. She stood there for a second, then turned. No tears, no pleading. Just silence. Jackson watched her walk slower than usual, one hand pressed to the wall. She wasn't asking for special treatment. He was asking to breathe. And that was too much. Something inside him twisted. This wasn't just broken, it was cruel. Later that afternoon, he stood by the back door wiping crates. His phone buzzed. He checked the time. Connor in his office, staff scattered. Jackson slipped his phone from his apron, opened the camera, set it to record, and placed it on a shelf, angled low. He didn't need the perfect shot. He needed truth. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about everyone who had been silenced too long. That afternoon, Maria joined him in the back aisle, stocking detergent. Her movements were slow, deliberate. You been here long? Jackson asked gently. She shrugged. 11 years. He paused. That's a long time. She nodded. Long enough to know when people stop caring. She said it like a weather report. No emotion, just fact. I've never missed a season. Never late, never called off. Jackson looked at her. You ever get recognized for that? She smiled, soft and sad. Nope, but I still have a job. That's the prize, I guess. It wasn't anger, it was resignation, and it cut deeper than outrage ever could. Later that night, Jackson sat in the break room, alone. The vending machine hummed. The clock ticked. He sipped from a coffee cup that tasted like cardboard and dust. He thought about Maria. 11 years, not one thank you. He thought about Tyrone, blamed for a mistake he didn't make. He thought about himself. Just another nameless worker now. And he realized this wasn't about long hours. It was about what people had been trained to believe. You are replaceable. You are nothing. He wouldn't accept that. Not anymore. The next morning, Jackson arrived early. The aisles were still dark. He slipped into the storage room, pulled a tiny camera from his pocket and placed it behind cleaning supplies. Another behind the loading dock column. One more near the office door. They weren't perfect, but they were enough. This wasn't revenge. This was about the voices no one had listened to, until now. Now, for the first time, they wouldn't have to explain themselves. They would be seen, raw and unfiltered, just as they truly were. Connor leaned against the counter outside the break room, a half-unwrapped sandwich dangling in one hand. 2 employees lingered nearby, half listening. With a smug grin, he said, "You know what I tell new hires? Push the old stock first. Doesn't matter if it's close to expiring. One of them chuckled awkwardly. The other just looked at the floor. No one challenged him. Connor took a bite and kept going. Don't waste time helping people who can't make up their minds. They leave anyway. Focus on the ones who look like they got money. Just a few aisles over, Jackson quietly restocked shelves. His hands moved steadily, but his ears caught every syllable. So did the hidden camera tucked behind the cleaning supplies. This wasn't just laziness. It was a culture of rot. Rehearsed, repeated, unchecked. And it was being modeled by the man in charge. Near the back entrance, by the time clock, 2 employees whispered. One held a second time card. "You sure he's not coming in today?" he texted. Said to clock him in.
"Yes. Nah. Dickhead. Slow."
The other replied. The scanner beeped. The system accepted the badge. They high-fived and walked away laughing. Jackson, lifting a dolly nearby, said nothing. But the camera saw everything. And more importantly, it revealed a routine. A pattern. Not a fluke, but an expectation. No one worried about being caught. Not because they were clever, but because they believed no one was watching. But someone was. An elderly woman stood at the register, counting change with shaking fingers. She was short by less than $1. The cashier looked annoyed. "Store policy. Can't finish the sale." Maria, without a word, stepped forward. "It's fine," she said gently. She opened her own wallet, slipped out a crumpled bill, and handed it over. The customer's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Maria just nodded, already turning back to her cart. Jackson saw it all from behind a display. No one else noticed. No one else cared. She didn't do it for recognition. She didn't even log it as a good deed. It was instinct. Grace without permission. Jackson walked slowly to the back storage room, a weight pressing in his chest. He wasn't tired, but something felt heavier. He sat down on a crate. His gloves were still in his hands. He thought about Maria, her quiet strength, her consistent decency, and the hundreds of unnoticed moments like this one. That kind of character isn't trained, it's chosen. Tyrone passed by carrying milk crates. He leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "Chances are you've seen enough by now." Jackson looked at him. Tyrone didn't smile or wait for acknowledgement. He just kept walking, eyes low, posture quiet. But the message lingered. It wasn't just Jackson who saw the cracks. Others did too. They'd just learned to survive around them. Tyrone's words weren't a warning. They were a subtle, exhausted kind of hope. That afternoon, Jackson approached the front desk. Calm, measured. "I need everyone in the break room at 5. Team meeting, no exceptions." Whispers moved like sparks through the store. Connor raised an eyebrow. "Didn't hear that from corporate." Jackson nodded. "You will." At 4:59, chairs scraped tile. Employees shuffled in, quiet and unsure. Jackson entered last, still in uniform, still wearing the face of the man they thought they knew. He scanned the room, took a breath. "I want to thank you," he began, "for showing me who you really are. I've worked beside you. I've listened. I've watched." Connor folded his arms. "This about the schedule, or what?" Jackson reached into his back pocket. He pulled out a heavy, gold-lettered ID. "My name isn't Jake. It's Jackson Harper. I'm the CEO of this company." The air shifted. Some employees straightened. Others froze. Connor didn't speak, but his smile faltered. For the first time, Jackson saw fear behind his eyes. Connor tried. "I didn't know. If I'd known you were corporate." Jackson raised a hand. "This isn't about me. It's about how you treat people when no one's watching." Connor flinched. "We all say stuff. Things get busy." increasing move and exercise vessel. You didn't just say stuff. You created a culture of silence. Someone exhaled. Another stared at the floor. Jackson continued. I didn't come here for a gotcha moment. I came to understand. And now I do. Connor looked for support. He found none. Jackson reached into his bag and pulled out a tablet. He hit play. Connor's words. His instructions to ignore expiration dates. The time card scam. The public insults. All of it. Unedited. Unmistakable. Connor stepped back. That's out of context. Jackson's voice was firm. No, that is the context your team lives with. Maria stood near the wall. Tyrone watched in silence. Jackson turned back to Connor. You weren't careless. You were comfortable in cruelty. Effective immediately, you are no longer with this company. No protest, just a vacuum of silence that felt like relief. Jackson turned to the others. You don't lead with fear, you lead by example, and yours ends here. Then he turned to Maria. There is one person who never stopped doing what was right. Maria, you showed up early, you stayed late, you saw people, you helped when no one else did. She shook her head. I just did my job. No, Jackson said. You did more than that. You kept this place human. Applause broke, soft, then stronger. Jackson turned to Tyrone. You spoke when no one else could. That matters. He handed Tyrone a form. This is an invitation to our leadership program. You've earned it. Tyrone stared at the paper, unsure how to move. But for the first time in a long time, something new filled the room. You've got something this company needs, Jackson said, his voice low but clear. Not just effort, integrity. Maria gave a soft smile. A few others murmured, small sounds of support growing from once mumbled mouths. Tyrone, holding the paper in both hands like it might disappear, finally stepped forward. He didn't say a word, but the look in his eyes, part disbelief, part quiet pride, said everything. Change didn't always begin with noise. Sometimes it began with a single, steady yes. As the meeting ended, no one rushed for the door. No one looked away. The stillness in the room wasn't fear anymore. It was something like respect. Maria stepped beside Jackson. Thank you, she said, simply, but with weight. He nodded. It should have come sooner. Tyrone stood nearby, gripping the offer as if anchoring himself to something new. He didn't need to speak. The nod he gave Jackson was full of dignity. One employee held the door. Another offered to walk him out. Small gestures, but meaningful now. The air was different. Not perfect, not fixed, but not broken either. Jackson walked past shelves he had once stocked, through aisles where once no one looked up. Now eyes met his, and a few even smiled. He didn't need applause. He hadn't come for that. He had come to find the truth, and now he was leaving it a little better than he found it. 4 weeks later, Jackson returned quietly. No cameras, no title. Just footsteps echoing through familiar aisles. Music played low overhead. The store felt brighter, tidy. Staff greeted him with smiles that didn't feel forced. Maria stood at the front helping a young couple. She moved with ease, with calm certainty. Her name badge now read, Manager. Tyrone was back near the stockroom, offering guidance in that same soft tone, but this time people listened. An elderly man dropped a can, and 2 employees moved quickly to help. No jokes. No hesitation. Jackson didn't interrupt. He just observed. Change wasn't loud. Sometimes it looked like care, like peace in the ordinary. He lingered near the exit, scanning the space once more, and for the first time since day 1, He felt something he hadn't known he was missing. Maria walked through the store with purpose, not force. She adjusted a display, smiled at a child in a stroller, checked in on a cashier. Nothing had changed about her, except everything. Now, people saw her. They listened. A younger employee asked her a question. Maria leaned in, answered with patience and warmth. No barking, no pressure, just steady, earned respect. Jackson watched from a distance. She didn't need to shout. She never had. Leadership hadn't changed her. It had revealed her. A customer stopped to thank her for earlier help. Maria waved it off with a modest smile. "Just doing my job," she said. But they knew better. And now, so did Jackson. She hadn't just done her job, she had shown the store what the job could be. Jackson sat in his car before leaving. He looked at the building, not through the lens of ownership, but as someone who had once been unseen inside it. He thought back to that first day, the cold stares, the silence, the way people flinched from connection. It was different now. Still flawed, still growing, but warmer, real. He hadn't fixed everything. Maybe he never could. But maybe that wasn't the point. Because real change didn't start with policies, it started with listening, with seeing. Maria hadn't changed because of him. Tyrone hadn't spoken up for applause. They had always been doing the right thing. All Jackson did, finally, was notice. And in that noticing, he found something deeper than authority. He found clarity. Jackson rolled down the window, let the air in. No fanfare, no announcement. Just a quiet exit from a place that had finally begun to find its voice. He thought about Maria, calm, constant, Tyrone, steadfast, learning, the new cashier who now greeted every guest with kindness. None of them had power on paper, but they had something more, lasting. Influence. And that was the lesson. Culture isn't built by policies or slogans. It's built one moment at a time, one act of kindness, one small decision to care. You don't always see the shift when it happens, but when you do, you know it. Jackson drove in silence, not with regret, but with reflection. He didn't need to check the store's numbers. That wasn't the point. What mattered was what people carried forward. Not rules, but example. If Maria could change a room, maybe others could change a company. And if kindness could survive neglect, maybe, just maybe, it could grow strong enough to outlive it. He thought of all the stores he hadn't visited yet, all the voices still unheard. Then he asked himself, not as a CEO, but as a man, what kind of leader listens when no one is speaking? And what kind of company do we become when we finally start to hear?